Welcome to Cut the Bull, an insightful podcast which addresses the news of the day and the cultural issues plaguing our society, bringing logic and context to these topics and discussing solutions too real for mainstream pundits. Now, here are your hosts, Charles Love, Shemeka Michelle, and Wilfred Riley.
Welcome to Cut the Bull this week. Thanks for joining us. I am Charles Love, alongside my co-hosts Shemeka Michelle and Wilfred Riley. And our guest this week, I'm sure you know her and love her, and some hate her. She is the former Smith College employee and rapping librarian Jodi Shaw. Jodi, welcome to the show.
Charles.
So, when thinking of things to talk about, I know your ordeal has been pretty well known, but it's always good to catch people up and get a little information out there. So we may broach that subject later, but for the to simplify, they were racist to you and didn't think they were racist because your race doesn't count as a race. But we'll get into that detail later. But
pretty much, yeah.
Right. When we spoke before, though, we had a nice conversation, but we touched on something, but it was right at the end. I said, one final thing, Jodi, I want to ask you this. So we didn't really get to go into detail with it, so I thought maybe we'd start with it here so we can get the co-host ideas of this situation and think about it and talk about it a little bit more broadly. And that is labeling ourselves, I guess, is a good way to describe it. I talked about how you go on these shows and telling your story is so great and you're brave because you're getting attacked by people. But I was finding that when you went into certain dens, you would say, yeah, and I'm a liberal. And, as a liberal, I think this. And you were just on Tucker the other day and Tucker was like, yeah, I got my guest Jodi Shaw and she's a lifelong liberal. And what I said to you, though, was like, it kind of bothers me that we all do that. And it wasn't really beating up on you because we all do it. And I try to do it a little less. I guess the first step would be to be cognizant of it so you can be aware that you're doing it. And I know I still do it when I think it's important, but I think it doesn't really help. And I think that we should at least try to stop doing it when we're right before we make a point about something we do. Because we think that we're trying to say, bring some context to it, but it's almost like throwing shade on the other side, right? So if you were to say, I don't know, I'm a liberal, and I even think that it's okay that you ate sandwiches, right? Aren't you implying that liberals don't think you can eat sandwiches? So I don't really think that it's doing enough good, but I understand why we do it. So I wanted to talk about that a little more here than we had a chance to do last time. So obviously you had a chance to give it some thought since the last time I brought it up. So what do you think about that constant saying, I think this idea, or I have this position, but I'm also a liberal, and I think it's important to tell you that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I was going to say hi to Shemeka. I don't think we've met.
Hi. No, we haven't. Hi, nice to meet you.
Yeah, I have thought about this, and when I first made my first video, it was in my video, I'm a liberal, and I actually didn't consider it so much as, or my intent was not so much throwing shade, but more like liberals or people who think of themselves as liberals who are too scared to even cast their eyes upon a video of somebody who's not self-declaring as liberal. So and as some words, he me. In fact, you had Sasha on your show, Sasha White. I was talking, we were just talking about this very thing and how it's almost as if it's the price, at that point at least, it was the price of admission to even having people listen to it, even having the left.
That's how you I don't even see it was the price of admission. Mm-hmm.
Yes, the price of admission into the conversation. And like somebody else said they actually felt relieved when I said that because they were liking everything like into it, but they were like, but I don't know, she might be a right winger, I don't know if I could trust this. And as soon as I said I'm a liberal, they were like, I can listen to the rest of this video guilt free, and I mean that's right. So it wasn't so much about, it was more like because people on the left are so terrified. I actually ended up making a video about that, about called fear of being labeled right wing, that we really liberals like need to get over that. Of course, now further to where these divisions are completely meaningless, but I still feel like they are. It's a signal.
Right.
It's like a bat signal, and Tucker likes to say it is because look, this isn't just wing people. Like there are people on the left who think this stuff is wrong. So
Right.
I'm
Yeah, and I don't think there's no
asking.
benefit to it. Yeah, I definitely see why people do it. I mean, again, like I said, I can't say that I'm not guilty of it, and I see why people do it. I just think that now we've at a point. Your last point is what's important, is that they're meaningless now, and it doesn't matter how many times you say you're liberal. We don't like what you're saying. We're just going to call you right. Look at all the liberals that are being called right wingers. They're still liberal. They haven't changed what they believe, but it's just like we don't like what you're saying, so we're just going to put you in the Tucker Carlson box, or like you got attacked for going on there the first time. You would talk to Tucker. What's wrong with you? So they're going to do that anyway. But I just don't know if it's still. I mean, if it's be interesting to see what you think, Will. I don't know if it's still. There's a benefit and a cost to it. I just don't know if it's mostly benefit anymore, although it used to be. What do you think?
I see why people do it. I think it's mostly useful when we're talking about politics. Because, I mean, I argue a lot online just basically to keep in practice. And people will often say almost random things. If we're talking about, like today there was an argument on my Twitter page about IQ. And people opened up a lot of their arguments by saying, well, as a black man, as a white guy. And that's totally irrelevant. That has absolutely nothing to do with your position on some psychological paper about the role of dads in grading or something. So that's just worthless. I do think that, and I respond to stuff like that just with bullshit, like by saying like, well, as a black man with green eyes or something like that, I disagree with you. I would put I'm a Christian in this same category. Like when people are talking about some issue like early trimester abortion, it's not really discussed a lot in the Bible, and they say, well, as a Christian. And it's just like, well, I'm not a Buddhist myself. I just don't think that has much of anything to do with what we're talking about. But in terms of Jodi's point, I do see value to saying, for example, although I'm a political liberal, I think that the left is going nuts in X direction. And I do think that the labeling of anyone to the right of Bernie Sanders as a Nazi is a real problem. But for those people that aren't crazy, when they hear someone like Jodi say this, or like some of the other people we've talked to, like Xavier Bonilla, there really is a sense of, oh, this is something that 95% of the population agrees on. I don't mean to go into a controversial R-rated topic, but like you shouldn't cut off small children's genitals or something like that. Having someone say, like, look, I'm a liberal sex therapist and I think that's crazy, it can actually be really useful. Similarly, I mean, I'm a conservative and I literally study political science and do business consulting, but I'm against many of America's useless, endless wars. So if I'm in a conversation and I say, I don't really think there's a reason we should be continuing this violence, and I'm pretty right-wing and I have a bunch of guns, but we're just killing people for no reason, I think that's going to have more impact than if someone is a sister of, Mother Teresa's order opposing American violence. So I see it politically. I don't see it in a lot of other arenas, racial, so on.
Right. Shemeka.
I would agree with Will. I do think that it has some benefit because actually I didn't know that you were liberal. I first read your case and what was happening or what happened about at Smith, and I just assumed from your stance, honestly, I was like, oh, she's more right, just because I've seen a lot of liberals kind of, take on this whole white guilt or white shame, or, I'm seeing them say, I hate my race, or my race needs to, we need to just kill ourselves just about, or they're constantly just, feeling like black people are oppressed in everything and that black people are victims and we can't do anything. And so to see you actually stand up for yourself, against what it seems like they're pushing, it was like, oh, okay. And it was refreshing that it was coming from a liberal.
Yeah, I guess.
Mika.
Yes, take a bow. No, I think that, no, it's definitely true. Like I said, it's not like I don't even do it. I just kind of, I'm in the early stage of thinking about stepping back and looking at how people react to it. It's definitely useful at times, like to Will's point. I think that's true. But his last example about the wars, I don't know if that was the last example, but his example about the wars is what I'm saying. It to some it will give context to the issue, and to others, people will also solidify that belief. And in that one, I don't know if even if that one is necessarily the case, but it will solidify the belief. And sometimes when it's not necessarily true, that the general conservative view for that item would be this. So, like, for if he's using the war example, saying that would lead one to assume that he's saying that because most conservatives are, the war hawks, right? But if you do that across every issue, that's one not necessarily the case, and it doesn't let. It tends to, like, if we're using the war example, it tends to let Democrats off the hook. I like to constantly point out and remind people that if you think of all the wars that we've gotten into in our nation's history, Democrats have definitely done their fair share of either starting or escalating them, and they never get blamed for them, right? If you, I mean, Will, the student of history, if you go through our, most deadly wars and the ones that are most prominent in the forefront of Americans' minds, those weren't Republican wars, right? Vietnam.
Well, I mean, to be fair, we've only been at peace for about 20 of the past.
Right, but I mean
years.
the big ones that people talk about:
both
World War I,
parties
World War
have
II,
a
Vietnam, the big ones, the big daddies, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, many of those wars lasted. So obviously, there are people that. So history is complex. I mean, like Wilson, for example, who was massively responsible for World War I, was on the left. He was also an enormous racist and had some other traits that people now try to link to conservatism. So this actually is kind of interesting. I mean, Dinesh D'Souza and other just straight up operative types in the Republican Party will point out that most of the slaveholders, segregationists, so on throughout U.S. history, most of the more extreme progressive warmongers and so on were on what we would now consider the political left. It's hard to take party politics in. I could actually ramble on for about 10 minutes about this. I'm not going to. It's hard to take party politics in like 1876 and fit that into the lens of our parties today. I mean, I think everyone had a mix of liberal and what we would consider very conservative beliefs in the progressive movement. I mean, women didn't vote until 1920, so there was a dramatically different political face at the time. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely a move the Republicans could make more. I mean, if you want to talk about civil rights, pointing out that slaves were held almost entirely by people who were members of what's now considered the left-wing political party and so on.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's true, but I don't mean from the standpoint of blaming. I'm saying that, I mean, how do we know as things, evolve, that most Republicans are pro-war now? Because you're pro-military doesn't necessarily mean you would be the first to want to go to war. That's what I mean. It's like, so you're saying that as a conservative, it doesn't mean that, I was for this war or that war, right? Like, if you look at current times, if you look at, post 9/11, wasn't that when they went to, because it wasn't like it was the president was doing it, making an authoritarian move. He asked the Senate to give him Congress to give him authority, and it was like 96-4 or something, right? That would have crossed party lines.
The first time, I mean, the war on terror was launched by Bush, who, I mean, was a fairly conservative Republican president. I mean, again, now, as I said, we've been at war for 80 or 90% of America's history, if you count the great native tribes.
So therefore, it's not Republican.
A lot of blame to go around. But I mean, I will say one thing kind of almost in defense of the social sciences here. Like, people will often say, well, how the hell do you know that? I mean, how could you measure something like this? There are actually pretty standard, I mean, Pew and Gallup measurements of everything from patriotism. Conservatives actually do tend to be much more patriotic in any real, do you like the country? Will you say you're proud of the country sense? And there also are questions about support for the military, support for conflict. So Republicans, frankly, are more likely to say, if the USA goes to war, I'm going to back, Old Glory no matter what, so on down the line. And again, that might have been different in 1917 or something like that. But the point was just, and obviously, Charles, you know this and stuff, but the point is just, if you say something like, well, I'm a male, conservative, gun-owning businessman But I think we ought to stop doing some of this stuff. I do think that that would have more of an impact than if you said, well, look, as a liberal, tree-hugging feminist, I really oppose all these wars we're fighting, because I think in set two, everyone would kind of assume that's how you felt. So I see the utility of it in political terms. With a lot of the other stuff, racial, religious, so on, I personally don't.
Right, right. So just the political stuff. But in any event, the other issue I think that we're having is we obviously have problems, conservative. We obviously have problems that we need to address, but we obviously currently in today's talks about the culture and things, we aren't talking about anything that's really going to move the country forward, because everything's a race conversation now. And the other thing Jodi and I talked about is how we don't ever talk about issues anymore. Think about you, Will, and Shemeka both have a lot of conversations on Twitter, and they're pretty frank conversations. You get into these debates. And people might say, I'm a conservative or a liberal. But you rarely hear what anybody's views are on any real issues that make a difference, right? So whatever you think of race relations or income inequality, whatever, we can say that there's a homeless problem. We can say that there's a crime problem. We can say education is failing and has been for about as long as Will said we've been at war. But nobody's talking about solution to those things, because no one's talking about those things. If they talk about education, it's through the prism of race. If they talk about crime, it's race. So no one's talking about solving any problems. Like I would venture, because I reach out to so many center-left people, so many of them I love and respect, that I think if we talked about issues, they may be like, I used to like Charles. But we never get to that point, because everything is about, why it's wrong to call them racist on its face, and we agree on that point. But I don't mind disagreeing with them as long as it's, respectfully, if we can move in a direction that we're solving problems. But we're not talking about the problems because everything's race. So how do you think this conversation, because lately we've all had it too on the show. We've had the conversations about the race. What I don't think we're having a conversation is about what the real problems are and how they're being, kind of masked over because of race. And then we just end up talking about race. Like no one's talking about getting the homeless off the street. No one's talking about how to lower the crime. They're just talking about, is it blacks' fault, or is it whites' fault, or is it Democrats, or is it Republicans' fault? So why aren't we talking about the actual issues that are affecting all Americans?
Well, some people would say it's on purpose, right? So we don't have to solve any issues, right?
Wow.
Right. As
That
long
would
as
be a
they
sad
keep
commentary.
divided, a lot of people a lot of people profit off of us being divided, for sure.
Wow. This is all cynical. Everybody's got sad and cynical answers. I mean, so you don't think, so Jodi, you don't think, obviously there's some people who make money off this stuff, but you don't think that there's all these, you're going back to labels, you're a liberal. You don't think that those liberals out there who all they care about is everybody, is feelings and emotion, and everybody feeling good, and everybody being happy, and all that kind of stuff, and they want to lift everybody up. Why aren't they, forget about those evil racist conservatives, but because they don't care about anybody, but let's go with the liberals. Why aren't they talking about, I mean, because let's be real, from what I see, I'm in New York City, so I see liberals and conservatives stepping over homeless people in the streets. It's not like the banking baron with the Monaco is evil and getting in his chauffeured limousine, and all the liberals are bringing meals to the homeless, or opening up their homes. So they care. So why aren't they even? I don't even want them to open their homes. I just want them to talk about it and deal with it and come up with solutions. They don't even talk about it. They're all at their elite university talking about where the black man is all being shot and they're uneducated, and it's because they're black. So how do we help them?
Yeah, I think it's a fundamental form of laziness, Frank. It's somebody, I just heard this the other night, it's easier to be brave than funny, or something. It was some comedian. And by brave, I think it was Lou Perez. By brave, meaning going and puffing up, and I know better why this is happening, leading all the finer points, and then stepping over the homeless person while you're having the conversation. So I think there's laziness and for all this talk, and Kathy McCartney, president of Smith College, I'm talking about you, for all your talk of into conversations and having the difficult discussions, I don't think, I think they're a little too uncomfortable to have. So,
But that's just
you know,
fascinating to me because I would think the race conversation is pretty darn uncomfortable, right? But they keep wanting to have that. You know, they
well,
keep wanting
yeah,
to say,
I don't think it's not, yeah, it's well,
well, if everybody's having it, I
there's
guess
two
it's not
different kinds of
uncomfortable.
uncomfortable. First of all, we're not really having a discussion about race, I don't think.
True.
And when I was at Smith, it felt like a script, and I'm white, and these are the words I'm supposed to say, white. And you're black, and these are the words you're supposed to say because you're black. You're supposed to talk about your passion and how hard things were, and so in that it's easier. It's like, oh, I can just follow the script, and then nobody will look at me, and I don't have to do anything.
That's true.
One way it's easier. The difficult part of that is you're lying to yourself. So, I mean, I don't know. It is easy. I think it's easier. And then you don't have to do anything. You can just say the words, and then you're done.
Right.
Like you
Shemeka, don't you think?
did your part.
Don't you think that we just stay in the same place and nothing changes? I mean, people go forward 5 or 6 or 7 years, and they're like, man, we used to complain about that, and that's the same thing on that corner, that same problem, and it's still there. I mean, when we talked to John McWhorter, we read an article he wrote 20 years ago, exactly the same. Isn't that because we're not addressing what the problem is?
Yeah, well, I personally believe that the more we put women in higher positions, the worse things get in America. That's my feeling. And I just feel like we're really sissifying men. And I think the more we do that, things are just getting worse. That's my personal opinion.
Say
That's a
more.
hard conversation that,
But I thought the future was women.
I hope not. I hope
Wait,
not.
Mika, I have not heard this before. I have not heard this before. This is new.
She wants to know why, Shemeka.
Well,
Yeah.
for one, I just think that it's out of balance, and I think that women are very emotional, and I feel like we need some compassion. But when we talk about, like, of course, I don't feel like we should always be at war, but I feel like we should be able to, if necessary. And it just really seems like we want too much kumbaya, and I don't think that's possible. I don't even think that would be healthy or balanced. I don't think it's good, and I feel like that's what women want, like this America or this universe that is just pussy. And the more they're in power, the worse things get.
As a
Do
woman.
you think,
That-
as a woman, she's saying that as a black woman?
As a
Double
The
the
white woman.
oppression.
Well, that's it. Do you think like it's this utopian vision, like that women in general, more than men, are kind of thinking there's some ideal, beautiful system that if we did and Z, we could achieve that? Is that what you're saying? Like beautiful, blissful, we can fix everyone's problems
Yeah, I do
kind of
think
thing?
women feel that way more than men. I just, from the beginning of time, it just seems like, men fight it out, and we don't always have to get along. And I think women more than men want to can we all just get along? And no, I don't think we can, nor do I think everybody's equal. I'm not one of these people that are like, give fat women the cover. No, I feel like I feel like there are differences, and there are going to always be differences. And I don't think we all have to be equal. And I don't think we all have to get the same things out of life. Some people are going to get a lot, some people are going to get a little, and it's just the way it is. And as long as we keep trying to make everything even or equal, it's just a mess.
Well, I can't wait to hear what Will has to say, but I want to say this thing. I'm not saying that I'm agreeing or disagreeing with her. And not that I'm afraid to, it's just that I haven't really, like Jodi asked her a question because she's like, oh, I haven't heard this before. I haven't thought about it enough. Maybe she's right, I don't know. But I will say this, one problem I can see with a lot of women in power is that whole push of the have it all thing, right? So it's like we're shifting in our culture away from traditional roles, right? So we're saying that women, first, were at home, then in the workforce. Now they need to be the CEOs and all that stuff, which is cool. We're just as capable as you are. That's fine, which is fine if that's where we want to go. But then at the same time, they try to use a double layer and say whenever it's convenient, I want to fall back on my femininity and say that no, you can't treat a woman that way. Well,
Right.
you can't say I made it to the top of my own on my own merit and I am 100% equal to men and there's no difference. And then, in a situation when I would punch Will in the mouth, say I can't punch you in the mouth because you're a woman. You just said we're the same. So once
Right.
we say it's the same, don't then go back to so that's what I think the problem
Yeah.
is because you're not allowed to you're only allowed when it's in your advantage to be just like the man, and when you decide that okay, now there's a difference, you get to pull out the difference card, and we're all supposed to say no, that makes sense. That
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
see that being an issue.
Even my kids noticed that. They came home, they see that, and they're 9 at the time. And they went to some event, and there were pillows. It was all kids' event. And the girls took all the pillows, had like 2 or 3 pillows per girl, and they wouldn't give the boys the pillows. And they said, well, because girls' butts are soft, something, and they need the pillows. Like girls are like more need pillows more than boys. We're like, but mommy, that's not fair because then when we play handball at school, they say the girls should go first because the girls are better, just as good as the boys, and
Right, right,
they got it.
right.
They see it. They
And Will
oh,
solve the
sorry.
gender problem.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, first of all, this is something that everyone's pointed out for years. I mean, there's an old joke, like, what's the hardest place in the world to find a true feminist? And it's like in a good restaurant near the check. I mean, so I think people definitely recognize that there is that you can use and exploit that duality. And by the way, I don't think this is a female thing. I think this is part of all of this game playing with like multiple standards. So, I mean, a lot of my Black and Latino buddies are just incredibly hotep, pro-POC, like all this, but are also fully willing to do things like go to law school on affirmative action scholarships. So on, like, for half the time, it's like the glories of Shaka Zulu and Moctezuma, and we're as advanced as you guys. And the other half the time, it's like, yeah, sure, I'll take my 150 extra points. Why wouldn't I? I'm a predator. So I think human beings tend to be fairly amoral, at least smart, aggressive human beings. And, I mean, I am myself, actually. So people are fully willing to use both aspects of kind of that power position we're giving people. I wouldn't expect anything else, but that's something we ought to think about before we give people that sort of power. Like, the basic pitch for Black business people is you can be Black whenever you want, and you can be part of the mainstream whenever you want, to some extent. Right. So, like, I'm a member of organizations like 100 Black Men. Well, if I paid this year, I don't want to BS at all. But I mean, that are explicitly African-American business organizations. But then I would be outraged if, like, a white firm wouldn't hire me. So there's a lot there. I mean, I think to the extent possible, we should minimize this kind of thing. Like, if you're going to constantly yap at me about feminism, thinking of some people I've dated in the past, picking up a meal every so often or driving somewhere might be welcome. But yeah, that's a reality. That's a duality that's out there. In terms of the first deeper question that was asked, why don't a lot of issues get resolved? I totally agree with Jodi in that I think a lot of people don't necessarily want to resolve them. I mean, there are things like early trimester abortion that the two parties have been batting back and forth for 20 or 30 years because they know that this is, I mean, what's the matter with Kansas? I mean, they're behind the scenes interviews with political players because they know that this is something that'll get people out to the polls. I mean, it's not necessarily something that a bunch of political operatives really care about at all. Is the Bible taught in schools or something like this? Parents might be passionate. CRT might reach this level now that the national GOP is involved. But, I mean, the goal is to get people out, get them voting, get them behind the agenda. One point on this, as a political scientist, a lot of shit is funded through what are called authorization plans that go for about 10 years. So when people talk about this stuff like, will the federal government defund every provision of Obamacare or defund Planned Parenthood? Like, there's a federal funding package. I'm not like tracking each one of those, but there's almost certainly a federal funding package that has those funded for like the next 5 years. So to very, very frequently, you just have people making noise to get the base active. Like every couple of days, I get e-flyers or real flyers from some Republican or Democrat I voted for in the past saying things like, you know, evil orange man Trump is seeking to return to the political spotlight and destroy the entire country, leaving you living in a cardboard box under a downtown viaduct. Will you give us just $15 to prevent your impending homelessness? And it's this sort of panic that gets people voting. So I think that there are many things that people are unwilling to compromise around. There are many other things that people don't care much about. I mean, I would wonder what the total number of like partial birth procedures or something like that is in a year. I've never bothered to check. But they're useful because they get people out, they get people voting, they get people aggressive. So, I mean, our leaders are, not to put it mildly, kinder than the people they lead, and we're not all that kind.
True. That sums it up. Unfortunately, it's
Got
sad.
that cynicism on deck.
Right. But
Yeah.
so no women in power. Not me, Shemeka. But and in talking
You're not a
about these,
cynic, Charles?
what'd you say?
Oh, I said you're not a cynic, Charles. You're a believer when it comes to our politicians?
Oh God, no. I think the politicians are
Oh, okay.
horrible, which is why I'm not part of a party.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, okay.
No,
No, I misunderstood you.
Are you
No, they're
unenrolled?
I thought you were just like, no, these last comments are ridiculous. I disagree.
No, I just said it's sad that they just don't care. They just want the wheel keep spinning because all these people are fighting over stuff, and the people that they're trying to lobby to are like, we really don't care about that. We only do it so you can vote.
If I can make one very quick comment there, I do think, I kind of feel sorry for the people that are true believers. And I think there are a lot of these people, especially in the GOP, that are like good Americans, for want of a better word. The idea is, you know, this was our country for a long time. Things were a certain way. It wasn't perfect. There probably was a lot of racism and sexism at the margins. But, you know, families had dads and people had jobs. And I'm going to vote for this guy who's got the 2 flag pins on because he's saying he's going to bring back the dads and the jobs. And there are people that genuinely want to do that. And there are also a lot of predatory users that exploit that. And that really is a problem. That's a problem for all political systems. So I do feel bad for those people. And there's a lot of stuff like this on the left as well. The left is far more controlled by billionaires right now than the right. But I mean, you do feel bad for those people that are sitting there holding an Occupy sign, crying because somebody got elected. We'll see what they do, you know?
Right. I mean, and I'm not like thinking that the politicians can fix anything. And I know a lot of them maybe forget about corrupt. Some of them just don't know what they're doing. But I look at this thing as mostly a cultural thing, and they're outside of those 2 or 3 fights that they're fighting all the time. They're moving things and moving the needle based on where the culture is going. So I mean, because they don't really have a core, right? Most of these politicians don't have any. They're not ideologues, right? So if they can go and make their $176,000 a year and get their pension, and they get money from lobbyists by selling whatever issue, they'll sell it. But we're pushing them. If we weren't asking for an abortion fight or a border fight or an income inequality fight, they wouldn't be giving us that fight. They'd give us whatever fight we want. So at the end, it still ends up on us. And Jodi had a good point. She wanted to talk about, as it relates to the culture and the problems, how we are losing this cultural fight because we're not getting in the fight on every field, in a sense. Jodi, talk about the
literally
things that you think are
field.
being overlooked. Yeah, on the playing field
Well,
where we're lacking.
Sports. I mean, I was a cultural anthropology major at Smith, so I think about culture a lot. And, you know, as human beings, we have impulses for power. To put it mildly, chimpanzees. And culture, or a healthy culture, has outlets to temper that power and socially beneficial behaviors. Comedy is one of these things. Art, music, sport. This CRT, this whole ideology stuff, like this ideology taps into in-group, this very deep power drive stuff, the in-group, out-group stuff. and it intensifies it, but there's no like, it's not a positive intensification versus you get on a playing field and it's us and them and you're going to kick their ass. Like it's a sanctioned social event. There's spectators. You're sitting like ways that are called, one person on Twitter called them aspects of a healthy culture. They are load bearing. And if they go, those are the beams. If they go, going, then that's that. What else? What is there once those become infected? And so, and they also act as glue. Thing that these things do that deeper than politics or transcends politics. So when you're watching a ball game with somebody and you're rooting for your team, the in-group, out-group stuff, you're getting out your yayas, your in-group, out-group stuff, but you're also connected with the spectators who are also rooting for that team, and you don't know who they voted for. It doesn't matter because you're rooting for your team right now. And so once this shallow political stuff, way that I feel like that's cultural rot. And so I do see a lot of value in having these discussions and maybe even debating the finer points of CRT. But what I see happening with CRT stuff is that logic, reason, and evidence are those are things are under attack. Valid, in fact. And so if you're trying to communicate, we've agreed to use logic, reason, and evidence. Those are Enlightenment values, which our culture is based on. And the other side or the other party is not using those same tools, then you cannot have a conversation because you can't evaluate each other's points if you're not using the same tools. So to me, language has become completely corrupted. Exchange of. So I see like these other pillars, the comedy and the music, and even in some I would even say religion in some ways. I feel like I hear a lot of stories about churches, people not going to church anymore because that's another place where people were connecting that wasn't about politics, and now they're not going to church anymore. I just feel like maybe it's not so much a push against CRT as it is a pull. Reinforce the pillars, reinforce the being, and more creative energy into this game, for lack of a better word. And people who are totally consumed by critical justice ideology they seem pretty miserable to me. I mean, they just seem miserable. They're miserable to be around. There's not a lot of joy. It kills spontaneity because you're always so afraid all the time. It's a miserable way to live. And if you look over and you see all these people who are having fun, I feel like you're gonna the law. I say, I just feel like that's an area that we're not talking about. Like we talk a lot about the academic side of this or the political aspects, but there are other very important parts of culture that I think could be strengthened that would go a long way in, at least as a preventative measure.
Wow. I mean, I think I agree that's important, but how do you do it? Since now those pillars have been infected by politics, so not only, and the culture, so they're moving culturally in the wrong direction, and everybody's talking politics, right? So you can't win an award for being a great musician and just say, thank you, I appreciate you all for loving my craft. You also have to say, down to the king, or whatever, you know. You got to say, fascism is horrible, and everybody's a fan. You got to make a political statement, you know, save the whales. You know, you can't just say thanks, right? So the politics is everywhere, and the culture is shifting. So how do you even get to that point that you are, you know, making those moves and those?
Hello, artists, comedians. Like you got to get to work. You got to swear. We can't swear on here. Right? Clean that stuff.
In between he just popped a PBR and some ecstasy. So if he could do drugs on the podcast, then you could definitely.
Oh, I just dropped me like half an hour ago. Will, we're vibing.
Go ahead.
I think we need to get to work. Like, what the hell? Like, stop. Like, the self-policing stuff. Like, if you're worth your salt as an artist, you're a truth seeker. Come on, you got to move past. I was never much interested in history, and I started watching this series on Amazon called The History of Us. Get it? History of the U.S. And I watched about how the soldiers, the patriots, they started fighting on the battlefield English, the greatest, most powerful army in the history of the world, and they were immediately just getting frustrated, just like everybody was dying, and so they were like, we have to get more creative, and they did, and that's how they won. They went doing things they weren't supposed to do. Like, so using the same channels, like writing essays, those are like the old. I don't know. I think we need more creative. That's what I think, and more humor.
Yeah, we definitely need that. But they're afraid. They don't want to be canceled.
They are afraid, right? But there's little pockets. This is a grassroots thing. I definitely think this whole thing has to be a grassroots thing. I mean, all the institutions. This is all legacy. It's all old. It feels like detriment in a way to me. Just I don't know.
Wow.
I don't know what the answer is.
Attacking the problem through the cultural aspect, since it is a cultural fight. I definitely say that all the time, but attacking it through music and arts and sports and comedy and things of that nature.
I think that, like, I could agree with that, but you can't even say anything anymore as a comedian. You know, comedians used to really, push the envelope, and now it's like you have very few that can make jokes about race or gender or anything. Like, they used to be really funny. If you think back to, like, All in the Family, George, he would say nigger all the time, and he would call Tom a honky all the time, and it was funny. Life was more fun. To me, it was more relaxed, when you could say retarded, and it not necessarily talking about somebody that was mentally, challenged, but, you could tell your friend, girl, you retarded. And it was nothing. Nobody got upset by that, And now everything, I remember I did a video and I was talking about people, and I told them they, rode the short bus. I wasn't really trying to come down on the people that actually had to ride the short bus, although I remember the short bus, and there was like 2 kids, that was on it. But we always thought, okay, the people that just, their elevator don't go all quite to the top, or they're not the sweetest grape in the bunch, you ride the short bus. And people were so upset and offended, and I was like, we've been saying short bus my entire life, and now all of a sudden it's a problem. So I think, everything is just so touchy now. I grew up dark skinned, skinny, a little Jerry curl, and it was nothing for somebody to call me a black African booty scratcher. I didn't want to kill myself behind it, though. I still had to go to school the next day. Now everything is bullying, and even this cyberbullying. What is cyberbullying? How can somebody, in Pakistan, molesting his pet goat, cyberbully me? I'm not afraid of Akbar in Pakistan. Where did this come from? Everybody's so soft, everybody's so sensitive, and things just aren't fun anymore. So when you talk about, okay, we can say this in the music or, comedy, I wish we could, but I probably get canceled just for explaining myself just now.
Oh, the African booty scratcher.
The people who do, but funny is funny. Right? You can
you got to get an audience.
Yeah, you got to get an audience. So I don't know that Tom McDonald, white rapper. Yeah. Look at that name, McDonald, Tom McDonald.
Like, how much? 15 million views. 15 million.
Yeah, in one day. I mean, and he does everything. That's how you do it. You do everything yourself.
Yep, you got to build your own. Yep, that's what Nick Simpson said.
Build your own.
I think that's kind of the key point. Like, nobody's actually woke. I genuinely believe this. Like, we've all talked about this. Like, on Twitter, I've asked groups of thousands of people, like, totally anonymous poll, do you believe that I could immediately become a woman by identifying as one? Phrased perfectly politely and all that. And 99% of people said no. And this was shared by feminist friends. It wasn't a very right-wing audience. I think there are a lot of things like that. I don't think anyone believes that their upper middle class, black or Asian friends are oppressed, or that men and women are exactly the same. There's some very obvious, pleasant, visible differences. I don't think people, it's so on down the line with a lot of this stuff. So I think like with Tom McDonald and his girlfriend or fiance, what's it, Nova Rockefeller?
Nova.
I mean,
Yeah, I
like they
love
both
her.
can flow. Yeah, well, I love Nova, but I mean, like they both can flow, and so they just started dropping tracks online. They had a good Twitter base because they'd said some kind of rebellious
Hmm.
stuff, and so 100,000 people looked at the track. They had the option of buying it, and they did. Like,
It's
I
a
mean,
really,
and
it's
you
really
you see this,
music too. It's good
yeah,
music.
it's,
He's good.
yeah. Shout out to
I mean,
Gravestones and Flowers for the Dead,
people.
Tom McDonald's two albums that are out right now. But I mean, send me a free copy, bro. But I mean, like, banter aside, like that. This is very true for big market plug there. But no, I mean, this is very true for a lot of things. I mean, when you actually, without false modesty, like one of my books hit the top 20 or so on Amazon. Red, White, and Black, which was Charles. I think you and I are both in there from
Oh,
1776.
yeah, I know that book. Didn't it sell out
Yeah,
like the first edition?
Yep.
it dropped
Wow,
number one in the world. Like it was
that is
number one on US
amazing.
Amazon. Yeah. So, but I mean, and I mean, Charles and I and Shemeka and so on aren't, insignificant people. There's like a bunch of black academics writing. I don't think anyone expected that. But enough people had
Mm.
seen like this very promoted, when you said kind of detritus, old media backed stuff like the later essays in the 1619 Project. And citizens were just independently asking, okay, a lot of this sounds like BS. What's the alternative? So when the alternative came out with these guys like John Sibley Butler and so on that are obviously heavy hitters of the black community, people read it. I mean, tens of thousands of them were sold in a couple days. So I think there's there's a mass out there. Even stuff, and I'm not necessarily endorsing all of this on like left or right, but anything that's an alternative to the mainstream, from OANN to Cop Block on the left, like if it's any good, it goes massively viral. Because people
Yeah.
feel like they're just being bullshitted and lied to.
Hmm.
Like the majority of the news is boring, center left, seems like it was
Hmm.
written by the HR department. It's obviously not the real issues in the world. So I think the answer is just, if you want to be a comedian and you're anti-woke among other things, and you have any sort of pre-existing base, you might not do this your first show, but I mean, if you look at trigonometry and so on, I mean, that's not necessarily going to be a negative. Just have the balls to do it, and you'll find that whatever they might say in public, 99% of people support you. I mean, that would be a real tip.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I
guess
think
the
people
key
are
is just to do
starving
it.
for
Yeah.
For
people are
stuff that's
starving
good.
for good stuff. It's like blue jeans and Coca-Cola in the US.
Right. They just wanted it. Right. They didn't even have to
They
be.
That's
want
a
it.
great analogy. Like when people look at why Russia fell, it wasn't because we beat them militarily. It's because no one wants to drive Yugoslavian cars.
Right.
Like they could say all of the
Yeah.
woke stuff that they were supposed to. They invented the term political correctness, but they saw like Madonna and Isaiah Thomas over here, and it was obvious which society worked better, had better sex, had more fun dancing, wrote better books. So people started imitating this society, or France and parts of the southern USSR and so on, in this communist country. Because people know when they're being lied to. People know that Pravda's not real. And by that, I mean our media as much as the Russian newspaper.
Yeah, that
Wow.
speaks to the pull. That's the attraction. Like, want real stuff, and they get sick of this bull
Right.
after a while.
Well, speaking of real stuff, and Norm McDonald and Norm and McDonald, Will, you were going to ask something about this trend of white rappers.
What? Oh yeah. I said that Jodi should spit some bars while she was on the show. She should drop a hot 16.
Did you bring a track with you? You don't have your track.
No, I didn't bring a
No.
track. I'm probably not going to rap either. I actually did rap today, though. Like, a student
Of course you did.
challenged me to, like, spit a couple bars in class. Like, legitimately, this happened. Because I mentioned freestyling back in the day. And I actually just did some basic, simple bars. But one of them was, I call you son because you're mine, not because you shine. And one of the other students in the class was like, that's unacceptable. I want to report you. Now, they were absolutely kidding. But it was really funny since we're talking about snowflakery and so on. Like, this abusive faculty member said he was your father. So, but anyway, if Jodi wants to spit, I would welcome it.
You can't put Jody on the
I'm not
spot.
good at freestyling.
Okay.
But anybody
Uh,
out there who hasn't seen my rap should see it. It's total. It's very.
Pretty good.
Thank you, Will. I was wondering if you saw it.
I did see him.
They're gonna
I
try to
actually
make
shared
me
it
look
a
like
couple
I'm
times, too.
beep. Did you share it?
Yeah,
Loser,
I did.
abuser,
I
a nut
shared
or a
it.
slut, gonna try to drag me down or break me through the slumming mud spit in my eye, make me wanna really an alibi. Honest, I am terrified of all the things they're gonna say, even if unverified. Lay it on a hook for me to take the bait, open up a book, my whole life to annotate.
There you go.
So,
Shamika's like,
She's like, it's not bad for a white woman. Not bad for.
Right.
Oh,
I was making sure she was staying on the beat.
there you go.
Like it was
a very white woman. Yeah,
they're
so
usually
that's a little
solid with the
preview.
lyrics. It's the beat that's a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
What?
I guess
Might
No,
be
like I'm
looking
listening to a lot of urban Kentuckians flow. Like they're mostly working class white kids. The lyrics are always solid. I'll just put it like that.
Right.
Really?
So,
Huh.
you
Generally, well,
surprised?
yeah, like no, actually,
No, I
first
just
of all,
always
I'm
thought that
genuinely
lyrics were
anti-
harder.
Yeah, well,
Sorry,
it's,
go ahead.
in general, I think that, and that actually was true. Like Appalachian region rappers tend to have intense, interesting lyrics about things like all of the jobs in their county leaving or the meaning of American society.
It's like country.
Catching the beat is something a lot of them do seem to have practiced less with. But I mean, in Kentucky, that's legitimately pretty interesting because obviously hip hop is shared working class culture by this point. So like we have these stereotypes because again, they're large coastal cities where most of the media, most of the influence makers are based. But like in a Lexington project, probably 75% of the people there would be Caucasian, 65 plus, and they're no richer than people in a project anywhere else. So it's the same culture. There are issues with crime. We have probably the biggest problem with opiates in the country. It's just a lot of the people in the hood are white because that's the demographic breakdown. And you see that less because there are fewer people. Like there aren't a lot of news cameras in Appalachia. There aren't a lot of people going out to isolated trailer parks to film that struggle. But I mean, yeah, like I'm sure those guys, there are people there that can contribute to quote unquote the hip hop game. Just like I'm sure there are people in Palestinian refugee camps that could, flow about their life experiences. There's just not anyone recording that. Diddy's not going to the Gaza Strip or whoever's booking new acts right now. So
Diddy's trying to find Lil Nas X.
I knew she was.
yeah, that's the new rumor. Yeah.
The what?
Nas X, I mean, that's actually. Quick question for Shemeka. What do you think about that? It was the first explicit black, gay, male sexual performance, whatever it was.
Man,
Lil
that's
Nas
long.
X made out.
I was disgusted. Because I don't know, when I was growing up and I put that in a video, you had to watch that kind of stuff on HBO or Cinemax. I was never sitting there watching TV 8, 9 o'clock with my mother or my grandmother and saw stuff like that. If you wanted to see people naked or people even simulating sex, you had to watch it on cable. And so I'm just not used to that being on channels. And I realize now people think everything is cable. But, there are certain stations to me that just shouldn't be on. I feel like that should be on like maybe the premium channels or order it. I don't feel like it should be what we see on TV prime time. I just don't.
No
And-
group sex on the peasant vision channels.
On the Who channels?
I said no group sex on the peasant vision channels, like the old joke about like non-cable TV. This
Right,
ain't
right.
HBO. This is regular TV from Dave
Yeah,
Chappelle.
I mean, Carol and Mike Brady didn't do any of that. Neither did Heathcliff
On-screen
in
entertainment
Class.
kids.
So, I just feel like we're putting too much in front of the kids, which I understand they could go online if they wanted to and find it anyway.
Make
But
them
I
work
didn't
for it. We had to.
and work for it, exactly. And I do feel like he's talentless. He can't sing to me. He cannot dance. He was barely keeping the beat. And I feel like he is being pushed because he is a flamboyant black homosexual. And I wouldn't even use the word homosexual if,
You could.
all right, if I could use another word that sounds,
What
that
would
rhymes
word
with
be?
maggot.
What would that word be?
I would use a different word because we could use that when I was growing up. And,
For me personally, like, oh, sorry, go on, Shane.
no, I'm just saying, like, I feel like they're really pushing him. I don't see the talent. I just don't see the talent. We have some gay artists that have talent, but yet he's being pushed mainstream like he's just so dynamic, and he's not.
Well, I think like just so first of all, I'm actually really pro sex. Like sex is fun. I think that there's an extreme focus on parts of the right about things like Jody's like
No,
wild.
No,
no, that's me. I'm
talk about
like,
this
well,
because
No, no,
I've
I'm
been wondering
saying
if woke
like
people have sex.
well, some woke
In their
actually in my
mask.
experience, not as much as normal people in my experience actually. But so I was just teasing there. I mean, it seemed Jody like you were agreeing, but like I actually the extreme focus on things like the neo trad movement on the right, like be chaste until marriage. There's some advantages to that, some disadvantages. I could care less if Lil Nas X is gay. I do think that there seems to be a focus on doing stuff, whether it's good or not, that's as like annoyingly shocking as possible. So like there's a French phrase "épater le bourgeois" that just means like let's make out in public, and shock middle class wives walking by, and I think everyone who's ever been to like their first rave has kind of done that, and it's kind of annoying as an adult. Like Lil Nas X probably isn't one of the top 500 rappers in the game right now. And I mean, the entire performance where he makes out with, black guy, then Arab guy, and there's a group of guys kissing on stage, and then they present like the best children's song or whatever. I mean, like there is an element of like, let's get as shocking with this as possible.
Right.
So we are the first, network to present a all black, all gay, multiple partner sex scene. And I think if I'm going to be during, say, a football game, watching all black, all gay, multiple partner sex scenes, my first question, other than what, is going to be, is this any good? And I don't necessarily think it was. So we talked about this the last time with Blue's Clues. They did this too, where they had like the list of different couples, like, and we're polyamorous, we're marching 2 by 2, we're transgender and just transition, and we're marching 2 by 2. In general, I don't see a reason to emphasize this unless there's an actual talent-based reason to do it, and I don't really see much reason to point it at kids at all. But I was just interested in what Shemeka thought.
right.
Yeah, I was disgusted. But, I'm a little reserved, That's, again, I feel like this whole, I feel stifled. And I feel like I could be a much better person if, I wasn't worried about my account being removed or, I don't care about people being upset. I'm used to people being mad and coming back and having, I'm used to that. But the fear of I'm going to say something and it's going to be removed, or I lose my account, or I'm in trouble for hate speech. I don't like that. I did a video about go ahead.
No, I was just going to say there's also an element of irony to that, right? Where, like, even if you are censoring your language a little bit, you're basically saying, I object to gay threesomes on children's shows or something. And that would be more likely to get you banned from social media than actually posting a video of the gay threesome during the children's show. I think a lot of people kind of feel that way, like, okay, I'm all about free speech. Why are you censoring my video saying this is BS? Like that song with Bryson Gray and our guy, Patriot J, where they opened the song by saying, this could get us banned from the gram. And it was immediately taken down, like within an hour after it went up. Like there's an element of irony to that. Like, one thing you won't...
Oh, yeah, but that's
like
really
the one
important.
thing you won't allow is Christian rap. Like the old... Like the old joke, like what could shock a hippie girl? The answer apparently is like talking about chastity. That's the cutoff. There, we're done. So.
But see, what you two just said goes right back to what you said earlier, Will, about that nobody's really woke. It's all a farce. This is a great point. So she can't say certain things or she'll get banned, but they can show anything they want to show, and that's fine. They can try to shock as many people as they want to shock, and that's totally cool because it's hip and it's cutting edge. And let's put the first transgendered midget on the cover of Vanity, right? What'd you say, Will?
I said, but it's so banal. Like,
right, I know. It's like, just because if you try that hard,
people can
it doesn't have the right
more
effect.
than one person at once. Like, I went to college too. Like the whole postmodernism thing is basically Most of Pomo is, and there actually are some excellent pieces about this. Like, I think the essay is The Masturbating Girl. What are these characters doing in these stories when they're not being proper Victorian women? So, like, the original Pomo idea was, like, what happened to all the racial conflict, all the class conflict, all the sex, all the stuff that's not being described in this dull arts world of the 50s? But the answer is, okay, then we saw that, like just stories about sex and class conflict and so on, for the next 40 years. It's now excruciatingly boring. And I think it's kind of about time to get back to what the other 90% of the day where people aren't, I'll say, having sex, if we're not supposed to be cursing a lot, and fighting. So at this point, it's just cliche. Like, okay, he's gay. A tenth of my friends are gay. Who cares? Why is this on the children's show? That I think is a question normal people are starting to ask.
Yeah, I also just think it's funny that they're willing for the profanity and the sex and the threesomes and the eightsomes and all that, but I'm supposed to believe they're offended by somebody saying a word.
Exactly.
I mean, it just doesn't even make sense, right?
Right.
You're preaching all this stuff, and I'm supposed to believe that, well, that person has to be canceled because they said something mean.
Right.
It just doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
It's not the rejection of morality, it's the imposition of a new morality. So, like, for most people, I wouldn't even say for most people, because I don't care about this as long as everyone's overage, but for most people, like, filming your gay threesome and then talking about children would have been considered, for much of human history, immoral.
Right.
Now, a lot of the people that are leading society, at least in the arts, culture, and as Jodi would know, this influences society more than we think. A lot of the people that are social leaders don't think that's immoral at all, but they think you're criticizing it is immoral. So It's not actually that we're moving toward free speech, real partying and thought, so on. It's that we're moving toward a new moral order where the person that criticizes, the transgender Irish setter on Blue's Clues, they are a bigot, they must be banned, but the procedure itself is perfectly legal and healthy. So everyone has something they believe in. Everyone has a God-shaped block in their head. The question is sort of what's there.
Yeah.
Well,
And
Moving us. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, you're
I was
fine. I was just going to say, I'm sick of people saying, too, oh, you have the freedom of speech, but then there's consequences. Okay, I can deal with the consequences of being called a raggedy bitch or even call me a nigger. I don't care. Just let me say what I want to say.
Right.
Yeah.
Jodi, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say it's also this new morality. It's also boring. We're moving to
Yes.
boring,
Yes.
formist, inauthentic. It's ones and
Yes.
zeros. Somebody said you have to watch Cardi B, WAP, the Grammy thing. I
Right.
see that. I can't unsee that. I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is on the Ripper poll. Like, what is going on here? I don't watch much TV, so I'm kind of out of it. I was just like,
Right. You say it's boring, but it also is a replacement. Shemeka kind of said this before, but it's a replacement for talent. So if I got the right volume
it's not the real
of
thing.
shot, I don't have to be talented. So now we have a swarm of people who have no talent at all, but we're supposed to say, hey, but they shock you when they are on.
or they're the right
Right.
color, or they're the right, whatever it is, or they're the right. I say fit the
Or they're
right
political
demographic.
views.
But I think that creates a vacuum. I think we now
It
bunch
does.
of people
Fill
are
it.
starving for real stuff, heart stuff,
Right.
and that's why the war of hearts and minds. I say go. I think the hearts are easier to get if you're real. You can get the hearts. The minds you can trick yourself, you can talk yourself out of it. But I think if we go for the hearts, now I'm whispering like Job.
Yes, you are. Well, I want to end on a moral note. We can't get out of here without talking about old Puddin' Pop getting out of prison. Well, that's one down. So, what are your thoughts, your general thoughts on the release of Bill Cosby, Will Riley?
I'm going to actually avoid any jokes here. Like, he went to jail for
No, you're
fucking,
not. You're going to start off by
Come
saying
on.
avoid a joke, and then you're going to say a joke.
No, I mean, like, but just so first of all, actually, like this thing with Bill Cosby, there's just so many jokes floating around. But I mean, like,
Just
anyway,
give us one. You know you
the whole
want
thing
to. Just give us one. Just one joke, Will.
Well, the funniest jokes about Bill Cosby were all in that single routine from Hannibal Buress, right? Where Hannibal Buress was like, Bill Cosby acts like he's the most proper black leader of all time, but he's a rapist. So I'd rather be an asshole myself, personally. And then he goes into like he might go to jail for putting his dick where it don't belong. And this went on for like 15 minutes. And this was kind of the thing that brought down the Cos. But I mean, so like, okay, one there. But in all seriousness, actually, I thought this case was correctly decided on the legal merits. Like, the whole thing with Bill Cosby is that there had apparently been kind of a non-prosecution agreement in place with a previous DA. This is actually pretty legally complicated. And when that individual left office, the incumbent, or the person that came in, just decided to ignore it and prosecute Cosby.
Oh, he ran on it. He ran his campaign.
Okay, fair enough. I'd actually completely forgotten that.
He was
So
like, vote for me and I will prosecute Cosby.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he came in, unethically threw out a written agreement, and on the basis of what, although I believe many of these women, there are quite a few of these women, but on the basis of what at the trial level is a pretty unreliable testimony and the rejection of the original agreement, they threw Cosby in jail for a long 10 to 15 or whatever it was. I mean, like legally, the case is a complete disgrace. Now, the problem with this is that I actually have sounded like really ethical this show, which I don't like. But I mean, like, the problem with this is the victims. Like, rape cases tend to be really crappily prosecuted by a bunch of bro-y guys. And I mean, because of this, because of all the legal BS and so on, Cosby he's free. That's it. So I mean, legally correctly decided. The obvious problem is that if you believe any of these women, I mean, there's a whole pool of people that were kind of screwed over by that. I guess that's a good segue to Shemeka or Charles, because a lot of people have said in the black community, like, I openly don't believe most of these women. So
Shemeka goes last.
For me, I mean, the number is pretty convincing, but I'm curious what people say.
Shemeka, you do not talk. Stop. Don't you even go. So I will say, because I'm not following that. I'm not following it. I would say, it's like I try to separate the emotion and separate myself from it. So I don't look at it from, I mean, not that I don't feel for the victims or think that some of them are telling the truth. It just really doesn't matter. I mean, it sounds cold, but it doesn't matter. If the whole reason you have no evidence is he said, she said, except for the words I as Cosby said. And I only said them with my attorney present because you promised not to prosecute me. That's the only way I got to say it. You got me to say it. Then you don't get to prosecute me for what I said that you said you weren't going to prosecute me for. It has nothing. So why are we even, that decision shouldn't even be based on understanding the victims or feeling for the victims. It's not a discount of them. It's just that, and what's shocking is that it took 3 years to do. I mean, you had, whether it was because of supporting the black community or whatever it was, you had many armchair attorneys lawyers who never went to law school, but were following the case that were saying this even without a law degree. So that it was this hard for his lawyers and others. See, I mean, get it. They got to get before a judge and all, but I'm just saying it was so clear cut based on the way it was set up. That and the way he went after, like Will didn't know about at least that piece about the guy running. The guy ran on putting Cosby in jail, and then what was it? 70 women, so-called accusers. They waited to the only one that was inside the statute of limitation, and like 47 minutes before that statute ran out to say, okay, we just got to scramble to. So obviously, whether he did it or not is not the argument. The argument is you can't say it wasn't a witch hunt, right? But to Will's point about people thinking he's innocent, my personal belief, Shemeka goes last, is just that I think he's guilty. I just think the black community likes to surround their own. It's the same black community that said Michael Jackson had never touched a kid. It's the same one that said Prince wasn't weird. It's the same ones who said OJ was innocent. I mean, they look at that's circling the wagons. That's all it is. I mean, he's a perv, but he's not a perv based on the situation that they got him in. He's not a perv that should have been convicted. Jodi Shaw. Told you, Shemeka's last.
Well, what's the question?
No, what are your thoughts?
He's guilty
what are
or?
your thoughts? No, what are your thoughts?
Well,
on him? You can
obviously,
be like me. You can think he's guilty and still think he shouldn't be in jail.
Yeah,
or maybe
no.
you just think he should be in jail for the rest of his life.
Oh God, no! I don't know why that deal was stuck in the first place. I
Not asking
as I said,
questions,
I don't. had to tend.
I think
A
it's
deal's
to
a
be honest.
deal.
I think it was a civil thing where they were like, "It's
Yeah.
going to be hard to
So
win. It's going to be hard to win a criminal case, and why don't you take a check?"
right, but then nobody else could. Yeah. Anyway, a deal's a deal. I mean, the guy apparently wasn't going to talk, and
Right.
said, "Well, if you talk, then we won't prosecute." I mean, a deal's a deal. So,
And then before
and
we
that
get
has
to
no
Shemeka,
bearing on or not.
right, not at all. But
Yeah, he clearly did it.
before
Yeah,
we get to
well,
Shemeka, she'll tell us if he did it.
Well, I think her point is more like what was involved. I mean,
Yeah, that's
you know,
true.
he,
But
all
well,
60
she's
of
gonna
them
hurt
were
some
just like,
feelings, though. She
wait,
gonna
you
hurt
know
some
what? The
feelings.
reporter tonight on the news, the reporter said that the only one who was let in, they in, and then she was called up to his bedroom where he was just getting off. Oh my God, why are you going up to his bedroom? Did you hear that? The only reporter that was allowed in his house, he summoned her to his
Shemeka's
bedroom.
shaking. Look at her. She's shaking.
Uh-oh.
Um,
Okay.
Well, the last thing I'll say that I do think is funny from a left right standpoint is that all these people were like, decriminalization, criminal justice reform. They're against the death penalty. They're against locking people up. A guy murders somebody. It's like, why does he got to get 30 years? Can't he get 7? But a guy raped somebody in 1847. It's like, why can't he just die in prison? Right? It's like they're choosing the crimes they want you to die in prison from. And Shemeka, you'll finish this up for us. Your thoughts on the Cosby?
Well, first let me say that, my mother was raped at 14. I am a product of that rape. I was born when she was 15. So I do feel like I have a heart for rape victims. People feel like, oh, you're a rape sympathizer or whatever, a rapist sympathizer. No. I do not like women, in my opinion, who try to use sex to get ahead, and then when the pussy's bad, all of a sudden he raped you. I do not think that you should, act like you're stupid when a man is saying, hey, I'll give you $500, let's go up to my hotel room. He's not wanting you to come up there to play a game of spades. What do you think is getting ready to happen? And he's already paid for the pussy, give it to him. And then after you giving it to him, you don't get to then come back and say, oh, it was rape. No, it was prostitution, and you were already paid, move on. Then when we talk about the drugs, nobody's going to say to me, hey, I'm going to give you this pill, it's going to make you feel good, and I'm just going to throw it back like it's nothing. You should take responsibility or accountability for the things that you've done. And then you have these women, some of them who said, like there was this one woman that said, we went through this for 2 years, and Cosby was not forcing you to have sex with him for 2 years. And then you have people like Janice Dickerson that's saying, oh, he forced me to have oral sex. Janice, please, you were sucking dicks like they were Tic Tacs. So nobody really believes that Janice Dickerson was, forced to just have oral sex with Bill Cosby. So I just feel like some of these cases, I read 35 of them, these women, here's your opportunity to really see if once I go black, I'll never go back. And then it just didn't work out the way they thought it was. And then here we are. But now he's free. So I'm happy.
All right.
The one thing with that, I think, is kind of like, I was talking once about the OJ case with a good buddy who's a cop, and he said, what I think happened is the LAPD framed a guilty man. Like,
Right.
OJ obviously did it. Like, there was blood on his knife hand, like blood leading to his car, someone down the line. But nonetheless, there were also things like gloves found in odd locations in his backyard. I mean, you know what big city police do. Like, it's very, very likely there was some, unusual interest in this case on the part of the cops. So I thought that was a good description. It's the same thing here. Like, Shemeka, when you say, like, a lot of these women, I've had women tell me that, in terms of, like, if I'm going back to your hotel, I kind of know what we're going to be doing.
Right.
So I think a lot of people understand that. But at the same time, if the guy's part sucks, you can then say no. The issue with Cosby was that he was throwing these pills. And I mean, apparently the MO is that people would go back to his room or whatever, and he would offer them a drink. And at this point, everyone had kind of agreed to do something. That's probably true. But some people had said that they certainly hadn't agreed to the sort of sex that ended up happening, or they hadn't expected to have these effects to nearly pass out. So you could say that he was drugging potentially willing people, but he was still drugging them. Like if you agree to
Some
hook up
of
with
them
me,
wanted to be, they willingly took the drug though. You don't know what
but
effect it's gonna have on you. If I smoke weed and take an ibuprofen, my mind is gone, right?
But
You def-
we're all adults. Like if I ask someone, hey, I mean, let's be real. After the whatever, do you want to hang out and party? And they say, yeah, I'd like to party broadly. And then I, without telling them, throw 3 Mollies in their soda or whatever it
yeah,
is.
that's
I'm
wrong.
No, no. it
like
should be
that's
two.
what he was accused of doing. It was the classic chemical rape. The thing that made it odd, the thing that made so many guys, I think, whether they wanted to admit this or not, kind of sympathetic, was that a lot of these people obviously had agreed to go hook up with him. They had obviously come with him across like multiple locations. Like,
And let's
yeah,
not
sure.
leave out the fact
But
that he was
doesn't mean
married.
you can drug people with something they haven't agreed to take. And
Right.
then sort of sexually abuse them. That's why everyone was like, okay, this is a dirty old man. This guy's been doing this for years. And he had done this. He had an MO. He did this with like, wasn't it one of the US women's national team coaches? It was with like professors. Not that the rank really matters, but I think everyone knew this was happening. And that's what he was prosecuted for. It wasn't the morality of the victims any more than like the morality of George Floyd really played a role in that case. You know, I think that's a pretty good analogy.
Yeah, I just think when people are saying, oh, 60 women said that he was a rapist, some of them were lying, and some of them willingly went along with what was happening, and it didn't turn out the way that they thought it was. Because if you willingly take a drug, you get what you get, in my opinion. My ass says exit only. But if I sit here and take a drug willingly and I get fucked in the butt, that's my fault, even if I don't like it.
And on that note,
It's awkward to talk about, but that was the issue with like the Kobe Bryant
I am
case.
so
I think
trying to
some
get
of
out
the
of here.
Cosby cases, like a couple of these situations. What people said is, look, I mean, I'm a party girl is a term used in a couple of these situations. Like I knew what we were doing. I didn't know that he was going to give me this pill that would make me incapacitated, and then he was going to do that. You know,
And
and
didn't he say they
that's
were
a
like
rape charge.
what did he say he did? Valium. Didn't he tell them it was
Yeah, I think he
something
said
else?
He
Quaaludes
started
he
with
got from
Quaaludes. He
Quaaludes.
was old school. I mean, he's been
Yeah.
around for a while.
Quaaludes. Wow. Yeah.
Wolf of Wall Street style. But I mean, but the thing is, though, like, if someone said, and this is the last time I'm going to say this, I'd like to hear what the 2 female panelists have to say. I have to drop off in a second. But, like, if someone says, I want to have sex with you, and I then, without their knowledge, give them 2 Quaaludes, and we end up having anal, like, a guy is going to be charged for that. Cosby
Yeah,
did this
I
60
totally
times.
agree with that. I just do the ones that took it willingly and the ones that came back more than once. I do not agree with them, and I feel like I can't side with them. And when it comes to OJ Will, now I know he walked up on the guy that was killing Ron and Nicole, and he grabbed the knife. That is how he got blood and the cut on his
He was defending her.
all
OJ
right,
is one of
well-
the greatest women protecting heroes. Well, I mean, with a lot of these cases, if you're talking about them outside of the justice system,
this is
like
like
OJ walked up. OJ was paying, what was it, $30,000 a month in alimony. He walked up on this good-looking LA waiter guy who wanted to be an actor, walking home with his wife, flipped out and killed him. And there was obviously a physical fight. He had some nasty cuts too. But I mean, he's not going to say that like, "Yep, fight broke out and I'm murdering a man." You know, so then you have a trial.
Well, I'd like to thank Jodi Shaw for joining us this week, and Shemeka and Will, as always, for being hyper entertaining. Thank you all for watching and listening, and join us next week. Have a good evening.
I got a country to say. Patriot J, I'm saving the day. Patriot J, I'm saving the day from you commies who let know you can't fuck with me. I got a country to say. God bless the US of A. Land of the free and a home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to say, cause I'm Patriot J and I'm saving the day.